Hi there, my name is Bill. I am a pilot on the Boeing 737 for a major US airline, and today let's talk about the 10 things that you should do when traveling by air. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Captain Bill official YouTube video. Today, we're going to be talking about some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way to make air travel a little bit easier as a passenger. Now, I've been flying annually since the age of 3. I've been a pilot for 14 years, of which I've been an airline pilot for 7 years. And of those 7 years, I've been commuting, which means I fly as a passenger twice a week to go to my base and from my base, which is Chicago, before I actually fly trips. So I have a little bit of experience of flying as a passenger. Now, these tips and tricks I'm about ready to present to you are just nothing more than that, just tips and techniques to make your life as a traveling passenger a little bit easier. So without further ado, let's get into number 1. So the first do while traveling by air is be sure to book your ticket as early out as you can. So as early as you can, because that's going to save you a lot of money. Now, when using my traveling benefits, I don't necessarily have to pay. However, I do use the airline's applications and websites to check to see which seats are available, which often means I can also see the price at which they're selling it. Now, the day prior is when the last time I check, usually before I head out to the airport to go to work, and I have seen seats on certain regional carriers out of my hometown for one seat left sell upwards of $2,400 one way. Whereas a couple weeks prior, that seat was only about $180. So being able to book as far out in advance as you can will save you a lot of money. Now, this next tip is not at the top of the list. However, it's still extremely important if you want to minimize frustrations and stress while air traveling. Tip number 2 is please review your connection time. A connection time is referring to the time you have between your first flight arriving at a hub like Chicago International Airport to the time that your next flight departs. And I want to emphasize that it's from the moment you park at the gate, not get off the airplane, to the moment that the airplane departs or is pushing back for your next flight. Now, that's inclusive of all that time, but that doesn't include what time it boards or what times they close the door for boarding. So if you only have an hour connection, let's say in Chicago O'Hare, it depends on the airline, but they could board from anywhere from 25 to 40 minutes prior to departure. So that means you only have 20 minutes really to make it from one gate to the next to start boarding. Then they're going to close the door anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes prior to the departure time, which is listed on your ticket, to ensure that everything's all buttoned up and they're ready to push back on time. That only gives you about anywhere from 30 to 35 minutes if you have an hour layover to get to your next gate. And depending on whether or not you're waiting for your valet check bags, or if there's a delay, or you come in on one side of O'Hare and have to run all the way to the other side of O'Hare, that could cause problems with your connection time. So be sure to have at least an hour and a half connection time when you're traveling through major airports. Hour and a half minimum. That should give you enough time to collect your baggage, collect your things, be able to get to the other gate with more than enough time to sit down and relax before they start boarding. Now, this next tip can apply both to your home airport or wherever you're originating from, or a gate in a connecting airport such as Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Tip number 3 is plan to be in the gate area or boarding area at least 1 hour prior to departure. So if you look at your ticket, whatever it says the departure time is, please be in the boarding area at least 1 hour prior. Now, if this is your originating home airport, let's say Orlando, you got to take into account certain things such as TSA screening time, the time it takes to actually get on the air train and go to the airside terminal, and factor that in as well. For example, we've seen it in Orlando all over social media. Sometimes the TSA lines can be upwards of a 2-hour wait. Well, make sure you include that so that way you get to the gate at 1 hour prior to your departure. At 1 hour, a lot of different things are happening. You have your customer service representative usually at the gate. They're going to make important announcements for you to hear, as well as I mentioned before, most airlines board anywhere from 25 to 40 minutes prior to departure. So that's when they're going to be making those important announcements regarding the flight. Now, tip number 4 is going to save you the headache, the frustration, and the delays at the TSA checkpoint. Tip number 4 is review TSA procedures, guidelines, and policies before each trip. At tsa.gov is where they regularly update any sort of security policies and what you can and can't bring through to the sterile side of the airport. We live in a very dynamic world, which means those things can change between traveling itineraries or trips. So the best thing to do is to go onto tsa.gov and review those before your flight. Now, this also goes if you're traveling to and from an international country, either the US Department of State website or the country's specific customs website. You can go through and review policies and procedures there, what you can and can't bring, and what paperwork and documents are required to enter the country, and that will help minimize delays, stress, and headaches when traveling either through the United States or another country. Now, tip number 5 will not come as a surprise to some, maybe to others who are a little bit less organized, but tip number 5 is make a packing list and pack ahead of time. So a packing list is very simple. You just put on there, hey, I got 7 days worth of traveling I need to do, so I need 7 pairs of socks, I need 7 shirts, 7 undershirts, 7 pairs of pants, etc. So that way you can see a list in front of you and know what to pack. There is nothing more frustrating or anxiety inducing than getting to your vacation spot or destination and realizing that you don't have something essential because you forgot to pack it. And also another key note to that is make sure you pack the day before, the day prior to your travel plans. The quick way to forget something is doing last minute packing the morning of a flight because you're running late, and then suddenly that packing list goes out the window because you're just trying to shove everything in your bag and run to the airport. So make a packing list and pack the day prior to your travel itinerary. Now, tip number 6 is going to vary per person, but my tip number 6 for you all today is dress practically. Now, I'm not talking about a specific dress code. I'm not talking about a specific brand of clothing or style of clothing. I'm just saying take into consideration what your travel plans for the day have in mind or in store and dress appropriately for them. An example of this is having a short, like an hour connection in Denver International Airport going from B terminal to A terminal. If you see this and you know you have it coming, you may want to wear something more comfortable to have a brisk pace in, such as tennis shoes or closed-toed shoes of your choosing versus an open-toed 6-inch wedge heel. That's all I'm saying. It's just dress appropriately based on your travel plans for the day. Now, tip number 7 is one of the most overlooked tips. I often give this as advice to the traveling public whenever I can because it is extremely important. Tip number 7 is familiarize yourself with the airports that you're traveling to. Each airport is designed differently. For example, O'Hare has terminals 1, 2, 3, and 5. Terminal 1 is gates C and B. Terminal 2s are gates E and F. Terminal 3 are G, H, K, and L gates, and Terminal 5 are M gates. Whereas DFW is labeled by terminal, so it's A terminal, B terminal, C terminal, D, and E terminal. Not the same. So you could be going from one airport to the other, have a completely different layout and labeling system in terms of terminals and gates. Now that segues us perfectly into tip number 8. Please download the airline application onto your phone or electronic device. There is a ton of information available through the airline apps. The airline applications are free, even if you're not a loyalty member or part of their rewards program. You can continue as guest. You can get your tickets electronically on there as well if you plug in your reservation number. You can get push notifications directly to your phone if there's gate changes, delays, etc. for that specific flight. And on certain apps, they have actual like Google Maps versions of the airports where you can plug in your current location and where you're trying to go, and it'll give you step-by-step directions on how to get to your next gate. It's invaluable, these apps, so be sure to download them before your trip. Now, tip number 9 is going to be extremely helpful for those of you like myself who fly out of a small hometown airport that is mostly on regional jet or RJs that require you to valet check your bag because they don't fit in the overhead bins. And trust me, they do not actually fit. It's not a scam or anything like that. They don't actually fit in the overhead. That's why they have to valet check them. It's an FAA requirement. Now, let's say you ignored rule number 2 or tip number 2 about reviewing your connection time and you do have a tight connection at a major airport. On these smaller RJ aircraft, when you valet check it on the way down. Then once you get to the airport, you sometimes have to wait anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes for them to pull your bag off the airplane, put them in the elevator and bring them up to the jet bridge, and then pick through the crowd of people to grab your bag and then run for your next flight. If this is you or this sounds familiar, my recommendation and tip number 9 is check your bag through to your destination if you have a tight connection. That way you don't have to wait for your valet check bag. You can just start heading towards your next flight, because trust me, the check bags will make the next flight if even with an hour connection, but you may not if you only have an hour connection, if that makes sense. So if you're gonna have a tight connection, like less than an hour, be sure just to check your bag through, especially if you're flying through on a regional jet where it is required for you to valet check rollerboards beneath the aircraft. And now for our final tip, tip number 10, let's talk about food and snacks. Now, as you could probably imagine, food and snacks in the airport are going to be a little more expensive than they are outside of the airport. So this is not only a time-saving measure, but a cost-saving measure. In terms of time, let's say you have a tight connection, like for those of you who are going to completely disregard tip number 2 about connection times. Let's say you get up early in the morning, you forgot breakfast, now you have a tight connection. Do you want to risk standing in a super long line for really expensive food and miss your next flight? Or if you pack away some food items, not liquid, because those are still not allowed through TSA checkpoints, but let's just say some crackers, some food, some little snacks and stuff, you can run to your next gate, get on time, and still have something to eat and keep you nourished throughout your flight. So tip number 10, bring snacks, bring food. It'll help save you money and time when traveling. And with that, it concludes our video on 10 things that you should do while traveling by air. I hope you enjoyed the video as much as I did, and I hope some of these tips and tricks will make your next traveling adventure a little bit less stressful. If you like seeing videos like this and would like to see more videos like this, be sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn on notifications. If you have other social media platforms that you like to use instead of YouTube, I'm available also on TikTok and Twitch under the same username, Captain Bill Official. So once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.